What's hoppin', croakers? We're Croak Dagger Games, and this is Prog Frog, a devlog series following the development of our indie game, Fern Beneath the Roots. We'll be explaining how we went from this to this, and the 5 lessons we learned along the way. So grab a snack and a drink and get comfy. Who are we? Oh right, we haven't introduced ourselves yet. We're a small team based in the UK, working on our debut game as an indie studio. We all studied game design at university, and getting into an established studio was always the goal. But then, the year of our graduation, the games industry kind of set itself on fire. So that didn't exactly go to plan. As 4 artists in a rapidly crumbling industry, we had to make ends meet somehow. So we took on freelance work and focused on improving our skills, even respecing into programming and narrative design. And a year later, we realized we kinda had all the skills we needed. And that's when the idea of going indie started to become a lot more appealing. We realized there wasn't any point in waiting around for something to happen for us. All we wanted to do was make games, so we said, let's just do it. And that's when Croak Dagger was born. Our team may be small, but we have big plans. But first, we had to come up with a game concept. You might be surprised to know, our isometric archaeology game didn't used to be isometric, or an archaeology game. It actually started out as a card game. When we first started workshopping ideas, we landed on a folklore-themed deck builder, similar to games like Slay the Spire or Inscription. We were even planning to have dialogue choices affect the gameplay, but somehow. We ran with this game for quite a while, developing an entire card game from the ground up, building test decks and playtesting them for weeks before we realized something. This concept just wasn't working. So we came together and agreed that making a card game wasn't the right move for us. It was a pretty hard pill to swallow, to set aside months of work, but we learned a valuable lesson. You can't be too precious with your ideas. We could have spent way too long on a concept that just wasn't going anywhere. So it was back to the drawing board, but we weren't starting from scratch. Our time spent on the card game concept wasn't a waste. Because we experimented, we realized what aspects of the game we wanted to hone in on. And so, we started looking back at older ideas we had previously set aside. One of the main themes we liked was giving the player a unique job role in a folklore setting. And after some ideas were thrown around, we landed on archaeology. The idea of digging up objects rooted in real folklore with a fantasy twist sounded interesting, and games based around digging and cleaning up objects had been growing in popularity, while still being niche enough to not be seen as oversaturated. We felt like we finally landed on something that had real potential, and we had a concept just in time for our first ever games industry event as a studio. Even though all we had was a studio logo and a rough elevator pitch for our game, it was enough to get people's opinions on the concept and inspire us to dive back into development. But this time, we gave ourselves a deadline. With an actual time frame for when assets and mechanics needed to be done by, it stops us from spending a whole month on the colour of a character's moustache. We decided we would have a demo to showcase for Develop 2026. Now we had a concept, and a deadline to aim for. It was time to make our first playable demo, something to show the core mechanics and overall direction of the game we want to make, and so we can get valuable feedback from people actually playing the game. Frankly, we started with a pretty ambitious outline for our demo. We wanted a full town to explore, multiple spells, and multiple quests for the player to go on. We realized pretty quick that we needed to be careful about overscoping. We'd seen so many great demos on Steam, with over an hour of gameplay, but we realized that at a busy showcase, that's not actually what we needed. So we focused in on only our core mechanics. Walking, talking, digging, and cleaning. As much as we want a fishing minigame, first we needed to prioritize the important stuff. With a much more reasonable plan, we finally began development for the game. And that started by laying the groundwork: an environment, a character, and basic movement. So we laid out a basic space and a placeholder sprite to move around with. We decided we wanted the game to be from an isometric perspective, with 2D billboard sprites for the characters. In case you don't know, billboard refers to a 2D plane that's set to always face the camera, like in the original Doom. Now, with our camera angle locked in place, our character artist could work on the main character's sprites for standing, idling, and walking around. Even though this is only a demo, one of our main selling points is our visuals. We're a team of artists first and foremost, and we want our game to look beautiful. Meanwhile, we started implementing more elements core to the game being actually playable. Interacting with objects and characters, dialogue timelines, for which we decided to use a plugin called Dialogic, and transitioning from one scene to another by walking to specific trigger points. The game was, slowly, starting to come together. But we still had to implement, arguably, our most important mechanics. Because we can't exactly call ourselves an archaeology game without digging and cleaning up artifacts. We decided these elements would be their own minigames, separate from the general gameplay of walking around and interacting with things. So making a basic version of what we wanted was a top priority. Since we'd started development, we'd been making the game in 3D, but with a few months until our deadline, we made a big change, and overhauled our entire game to be entirely 2D instead. This was a slightly stressful, but needed change. Our hope was that 3D would streamline our process, but even just figuring out collisions made it a nightmare. It just wasn't worth the hassle. And since all of our sprites were already 2D, it made sense to just make the switch. But the entire game still had to be reworked on a fundamental level. Which begs the question, with our deadline rapidly approaching and all these changes being made to the game, did we do it? Our goal of showcasing a game at Develop Brighton was ambitious, but we were immensely proud to be one of the 50 indie studios chosen to showcase our game at Brilliant Indie Treasures. So yes, we did it. We got so much amazing feedback, and it was such a fun experience to see people playing our game for the first time. We showcased our first ever playable demo, and it went great. So get people to play your game. As scary as it was, the feedback and playtesting from the public gave us so much insight on what people liked and disliked, how clear and understandable our game was, what bugs we needed to fix, and to confirm our concept was something people were actually excited about. Well, that's our journey so far, but what comes next? Well, we're still going full steam ahead with development, adding animations, fleshing out the digging and cleaning mechanics, and building out the island for you to explore. And funding would be nice. Well, that's all from us. If you enjoyed our first devlog, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time. Croak Dagger out.